Welcome to Surviving Roots, the podcast where we journey through the complexities of our emotions together. I'm your host, Carrie Fund, and I'm here to guide you on a path of self-discovery, understanding, and healing. In each episode, we'll explore a range of emotions and experiences, from navigating grief and trauma to managing stress and anxiety. Through candid conversations, expert insights, and practical strategies, we'll uncover the tools you need to navigate life's emotional landscape with resilience and grace. So, let's embark on this transformative journey together. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself this time. This podcast is for you. I'm so excited for today's guest. Dara Levan is an author and the founder of Every Soul Has a Story podcast. She believes in the transformative power of storytelling, a theme that permeates her debut novel, It Could Be Worse, released this year. Dara also contributed to the essay collection on Being Jewish Now, Reflections from Authors and Advocates by Zibby Books. After leaving a career in speech therapy, Dara dedicated herself to full-time writing, creating, and connecting. Welcome, Dara.
Thank you for having me. This is such an honor, and I'm so excited to be in conversation with you, Carrie.
I'm so excited to be talking with you today. I'll take what I can get. I know we both live in Florida, and hopefully one day we will be having lunch and coffee, but I will take you on Zoom now.
I think we need a weekend.
I know. I mean, seriously, with your book, I could talk about it all day. And I'm sure there's so many things we could talk about because it's interesting. We started following each other on Instagram, and I know so many authors that you know just from back in my days in New York City. And I was like, wow, we have so many people in common. I can't believe I'm just now connecting with you. But I could not have been more excited with the release of your book, It Could Be Worse, because I relate to the landscape of this story so well, and your protagonist, Allegra Gill. So can we just dive in because there's so much to talk about?
Go. I love diving in.
Let's dive in. I would love to know what the inspiration was behind your debut novel.
I love that question. I've been asked it often. Several things, really. One, quite frankly, I've had so many narcissists in my life. I know you can relate.
Just a little.
Just a little bit. And truly, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So once you awaken, it's hard to unsee, it's hard to unhear. But what truly really pushed me toward this topic, Carrie, I have not seen narcissism explored in fiction. There are a gazillion self-help books, there are essays, there's Psychology Today, all of which is wonderful and I've leaned on for research. But when I started my podcast, gosh, I'm on my 5th year now, I realized I had all these stories coming to me. People were trusting me to share their stories about trauma, about resilience. And I kept hearing the word narcissism. Then I looked back on my own life and thought, oh, that's interesting. I've had employers that are pathologic narcissists, family members, friends.
Yeah.
And so I had this epiphany. I said, I've got to explore this. I never thought I'd write a novel. So just going back for a moment,
oh, wow.
I was a journalism major in college. I've always been about a truth seeker. I've edited 5 books on ADHD, social skills, things within my old profession. But I've always been a writer since I could talk, which I joke was probably in utero. If we had the technology back then, I'm sure you'd hear me babbling.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And so I thought, what if, which is a question all writers ask, nonfiction, fiction, it's the absolute epitome of what an author explores. And if you look at really all fiction writers, and it could even be a thriller, because a lot of people, how much truth is in your story?
Yeah.
Well, there are emotional truths. My heart is in there, certainly on every one of those pages. The flashbacks in the novel are inspired by a camp that I went to for 8 summers called Interlaken. That is still a huge part of my life.
That's wonderful.
And I really wanted to explore unconditional love in all its forms, and also conditional love, which, as you know, a narcissist, unfortunately, is really not capable of pure connection because they're not connected to themselves. So
true.
Right? And I also learned in my research, going down the rabbit hole, because I love research, love asking why. I mean, just ask my husband. I make my whole family crazy. But I want to know the why. And I also learned, unfortunately, if someone is a really severe pathologic narcissist, a lot of therapists won't even take them on because you can't help them. If you're not aware of your own behavior, if you're
Yeah.
not connected to your own self, your sense of self, really, it's an emptiness.
Yeah.
You can't change behavior. So I learned all of that. And so Allegra is a typical child of narcissist. She's a pleaser, she's a perfectionist. She wants to keep the peace, but her brother Jack, not so much. I loved
Mhm.
writing Jack. And Jack really holds up the mirror. He knows who he is. And it's interesting because Allegra, you would think might be kind of, a wimp or sort of like a wilting flower. She's not.
Yeah.
She's a very strong woman. She's an amazing mother. She has incredible marriage. She's ironically a therapist, but as often in many of our own professions, we don't see what's right in front of her. And
Right.
hopefully, as the reader is reading and saying, no, 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 don't you see? I'm hoping that was communicated.
Yes. Yes.
And my hope is that I could teach through story because I believe story has such the power to change us, to connect us, to really have us our own self-actualizations and through
Yeah.
fiction because even our shadow side, we all have shadow sides. I think I was in LA. I don't know, one of my bookstore events on my tour, somebody asked a really interesting question. I think they said, why didn't you write nonfiction?
Hmm.
And fiction allows us a safe space to relate to even perhaps the not so perfect sides of our souls, of
Yes.
ourselves, if we're being honest with
Yes.
ourselves, right? So there is one or two really dark characters in there.
Yeah.
And maybe someone that has a bit more awareness than a really severe narcissist might see themselves and say, wow, I treat my daughter this way, or I treat my son or my
Yeah.
spouse or my partner. And so I'm hoping to awaken in that small way and really stimulate conversations, not just around this topic, but around motherhood and around love in general.
Yeah. I think your book does just that because, a lot of people that aren't willing to really look at themselves or even question the way they treat others or maybe the way they're treated, you know, they're not going to go and pick up like a nonfiction book or a self-help book because they don't already think that they don't need that. They don't want to face it. They don't even want to open that
Exactly.
box that's like
Right.
padlocked, that's put in the back of the closet. But anyone, that's looking for entertainment or a good story will pick up a novel. So you already sort of have those defenses down, I think, a little bit in your reader. So, and then as they dive in, take a deep breath, people, because if any of this relates to you, I was just like, wow, Allegra, wow, Allegra, wow, Allegra. So, I mean, I really related to the landscape of your story, and your protagonist is brave and relatable. So I think a lot of people see themselves in this character or in her family and those characters. I think it's really relatable. And I think at the end of the book, you, as a reader and as just a human being, you possibly explore your relationships with your friends or your parents or yourself. And you have a lot of questions. There's a lot of self reflection after reading this book. To me, it's more than a novel. So I think you did a great job. I
Well, that
really
means
did.
so much to me, Carrie, because you don't know who you're touching, right?
Yeah.
And I've been so supportive and emotive and expressive about this novel. It means so much to me. And I wish your listeners could see your face. Carrie just sort of radiates so many emotions, and I love it in such, above all,
Thank you.
authenticity. That's so important to me. Forgive me, there's so much bullshit in our world.
Oh, gosh.
And I talk about this a lot in my own writing, even in my own friend circles, just in general.
Yeah.
I think I have this real fascination with how people are curating themselves. There's
Yeah.
such a narcissistic component to that too. And
Yeah.
I don't do that. People say that to me, what do you do on your Instagram? I said, whatever I feel like literally,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the right answer. I don't care.
Yeah.
And if it's ever a time it doesn't bring me joy and it doesn't feel aligned with who I am as a human,
Yeah.
I'll delete it. So it kind of explores that too, the masks,
Yeah. I
the
think that's
facade.
I think that's great that you show up like that on your social media because at the end of the day, social media can feel like a full-time job. And I've even myself, I've had a lot of people say, well, what company do you use or who do you use? And I'm like, I don't use anyone because it's not a job in terms of like planning ahead and like scheduling in my calendar. Okay, Thursday, I'm going to be in pain and I'm going to cry because of my mother wound. On Saturday, I'm going to share a parenting fail. Like, I just can't live my life like that.
Me either. I'm with you,
So
girl.
some
Honestly.
days I'm just reposting stuff, and other days I'm like, you know what? Like I'm showing up in my mom bun or my hair that I haven't washed in 3 days and throwing on some lip gloss. And I'm going to talk about something that I couldn't sleep last night and was just like, this bothered me. And maybe other people can relate if they're on that cycle breaking path. So, yeah, I think being authentic and not trying to be this fake, perfect human being
And
is
then I'll
feed your
explore with
soul.
you. I have something, I'm curious your thoughts on this, because there's the other side that I've noticed lately where if you're not oversharing, if you're not bearing your soul, then you're
Yeah.
not being authentic. And I really very vehemently disagree, because I think if you're keeping a boundary up with what feels right for you
Yeah.
as a creator, or whoever you are in the world,
Yeah.
that's being authentic. For
Yeah.
instance, you won't see my kids much on social, maybe
Yeah.
once. That's my own personal boundary. They're 20
Yeah.
and 22. I could
Yeah.
post the heck out of them. But for me personally, that's something I chose.
Yeah.
And no judgment. I love seeing your kids. It brings me such joy to see all of my friends' kids. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I'm not being authentic. You might, after I shared something, I could be consoling my son. Maybe I just had his heart broken and my daughter had a panic attack. I mean,
Yeah.
but again, for me personally, that's not my story to share. That's theirs.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not being authentic. What I think is inauthentic is people creating stories just for the algorithm, just
Yeah.
to, I don't know. I just, and you could feel it. Even
Yeah.
some people that are quite convincing, I can personally sense it and go,
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And I think, it's super important like to remind yourself that and everyone listening that social media are just like moments. They're little glimmers, whether they're sad glimmers or happy glimmers or successful or failures. They're glimmers because I can put down the phone, hit publish, put down the phone, and then it's freaking chaos in the kitchen. And I forgot to meditate that morning, but I make myself, I remind myself I'm not perfect. It's okay. I'll try to do it tonight when I go to sleep. Like social media are just little glimmers of all kinds of things on the feeling spectrum. So I think that's really important. And I think just showing up, authentic can mean a lot of things to people. But I think just showing up and being yourself and not portraying a character just to be
mhm.
liked or to get comments. I mean, I think just keep it simple. I think as we get older too, we realize that. I mean, I used to dread being in my 40s. And I thought and now like looking back, I'm like, God, if my 20-something-year-old self knew everything I knew today, life could have been so much different.
Let
But
me tell you, I just turned 50 in June, and I had a friend years ago that said, "You think it's the fabulous 40s? It's the bleep, bleep, bleep 50s." And
I
it's
can't wait.
I love being 50. I want to write a big banner outside my house. I don't understand people that don't want to talk about their age. I've lost so many people so young, even as recently as a few months ago, and I value life more than anything in the world. And I
Yeah.
mean that, Carrie, with my whole heart.
Yeah.
And that's also what I hope some of the messages in my novel, It Could Be Worse, is, sometimes there's not always a perfect little happy ending, but
Yeah.
you have to do, one of the themes in the novel, and I hope it was communicated, is to choose life on your own terms and
Yeah.
choose how our own stories end.
Yeah.
Because we can. It's
Yeah.
not usually an easy path, though.
Mhm.
So, there's that, and you know it well, I'm sure you're nodding. And, but like, I tell my kids this all the time, and I've written about it. You don't learn from the really easy breezy stuff. I really wish we did. I
Yeah.
really wish that's how life sort of unfurls and unfolds,
Yeah.
but it's just not been my personal experience.
It's true. And I just reminded my daughter of that lesson. Actually last weekend during one of her tennis tournaments, she placed one spot less than what she wanted to. And I was like, you know, these are the moments where growth happens. These are the moments right now. Like you have to pay attention. So I 100% agree. And speaking of like awakening, and realizing how much better it is in our 40s and 50s, I want to get back to your novel because the themes of acceptance and awakening are so strong in your book. And I would like to know, like, what do you hope readers to walk away from after reading It Could Be Worse?
I love that question. Thank you for asking it.
Oh,
I really hope they walk away feeling inspired, empowered, educated, and I really hope it stirs up conversations within themselves and gives them courage to perhaps conversations with loved ones or even strangers, and just to
yeah.
see the world in a different way.
Yeah.
And no judgment. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just, that
Yeah.
never occurred to me. Or wow, that made me cry in a way I haven't in years. Or wow, that's a bold character who really just took life by the, you know what, and said, I'm doing me how I want to do me.
Yeah.
So the themes of resilience and authenticity is really not only in this novel, but when I started my blog 7 years ago, just who I am. That's who I
Yeah.
how I exist in the world. I don't know any other way. And so I hope that Allegra's journey communicates that as well.
It so does. I love this character because she is so relatable. And I think that's so important in a novel, especially with such heavy themes, is to be able to relate to a character as the daughter, as the mother, as someone who's really coming to terms and making the choice to like can take control of the narrative. So I think she's a brilliant character. You did amazing. And I love in your writing these flashbacks. If you could talk about why you incorporated these flashbacks, because someone who has experienced, a journey similar to Allegra's, your past can always pop up in your present anytime. And that self-awareness is so important. It's important, especially as a mother, like she is, because I never want, as a mother myself, my past parenting my own kids. So I loved these flashbacks that you incorporated throughout your novel. Can you tell us a
Oh,
little bit about your writing style and why you wrote the story like you did?
thank you. So I was very intentional, and it came to me. I don't remember one of the drafts. I thought, wait a minute, there's clearly a huge musical theme. It opens in a piano store. Allegra is a musical term. And I thought, let me write it in the cadence of a waltz, because healing is like a waltz, right?
Yeah.
2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I wrote it, if you know anything about music, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the chapters go present, present, past, present, present, past. And just like any patterns, breaking patterns of abuse, breaking patterns of even like nail biting, it could be something minor.
Yeah.
In my mind, life is about patterns. And so I mimicked in the way I created the novel. And that's why the flashbacks were not only about showing Allegra in different phases of her life, in different areas, in different roles, but also to reflect the musical component. The camp she went to is a music camp.
Yeah.
Super creative. I called it Camp Intermezzo instead of Camp Interlochen.
I
I
love
tell
it.
you something. I know. I wanted to just call it Interlochen, but that was vetoed, understandably. Although it's such a positive, it's her safe space, but she doesn't realize it as an adult. And I feel like that's so true in any scenario for us as we grow into, as we become who we're meant to be.
Mhm.
That you reflect on your past. Again, if you're on a path of evolvement, like I know you are and I
Yeah.
am, and it's not just to say, oh, that's just terrible what my mother or father did, but it's also, hey, look how far I've come.
Yeah.
Or that job I took, gosh, I could not imagine doing that now. Why did
Yeah.
I accept that? And it could even just be something not as, I don't think it's all negative. It's coming across that way. Another example that didn't fulfill my life's purpose, for instance. I would tell my younger self, for instance, I thought that fulfilled me. I thought that really felt
Yeah.
great. But looking back, fill in the blank. So that's
Yeah.
why I have flashbacks. But in addition to that, I structured the novel in a lyrical, musical sort of pattern, and again, of a waltz, because I really feel any type of healing, at least in my personal experience, it's not just forward. You definitely have to go
Oh,
back and
yeah.
move forward, right?
100%. I mean, it's definitely not a clear path. It's definitely not linear. And there are lots of detours and potholes, people. So you just got to sort of like, okay, it's
And I'm
okay.
here for it all.
Yeah, I'm here for it all. You have to be because I feel like if you go into healing and really make the commitment to yourself and you think it's just going to be like, okay, I'm going to journal, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to
Right.
book a therapist, I'm going to do this. And then you have those like days like where it's painful or you're not happiness or feeling in control. You might quit. You might quit. So you got to know what you're getting into. It's like anything in life. It's like motherhood. Like you can say, I'm never going to let my kid watch an iPad. My kid's only going to eat organic.
Oh
They're going
yeah.
to be this and that. And it's like, okay, sure, sweetie, just embrace it. Because if you don't, you're going to set yourself up for like some mental, failure and like burnout because you got to just embrace the chaos. And that
It's so
includes
true.
motherhood and healing.
Exactly.
Well, this book, It Could Be Worse, has a lot of heavy themes and you balance the creative aspects of your writing beautifully. But what kind of research did this, entail with writing this book?
I read several books on narcissism. I actually, ironically, have a lot of friends that are therapists, so I'm not sure
Thought you
what
were
to
going to
do.
say narcissist.
No, those are gone. I had gently let them go and wish them well with love.
Oh my
I
gosh.
learned a lot from people I interviewed,
Yeah.
both on my podcast and then also actually psychotherapists. I've interviewed at least 4 or 5. I've read a ton of books. And so kind of putting all of that together
Yeah.
in a way that, it's funny because I've had, no joke, at least 3 or 4 strangers like on Amazon or something reach out and say, I gave this to my therapist, or someone else said, this is like a self-help book, but it's a story.
Yeah.
And I really set out to do that. It's just where my heart took me. Like
Yeah.
I'm already on my second book. Oh, and I should mention,
Hey.
yay. I have to just get my butt in the chair and stop, which is really hard. So interestingly, I don't know if you noticed, Allegra is a stutterer. So I brought in my speech therapy background, which I'm doing in book 2, because that's something else that I haven't personally seen represented in fiction.
Yeah.
My protagonist for book 2 will encounter something where somebody very, very important to her gets a diagnosis, a neurological diagnosis, and it'll really upend her life. And she's got some tough choices to make.
Wow.
And so like Allegra only stutters with one person. I don't want to give too much away, but it's an unusual form of stuttering. So there's 3 types, right? There's childhood stuttering, which is more typical. You'll see that with kids usually around age 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of stuttering. There's neurologic stuttering if you have a brain injury or a stroke or a car accident. And depending on what lobe in your brain it affects, there's also stuttering from trauma, and it's not so common. And so
I've never heard of that. Wow.
Yeah, and it's people who know, they know. And so interesting, I thought it would be, as a speech pathologist, I'm not practicing anymore, but kind of once a speech therapist, always, it's who I am. And I thought it'd be interesting to explore how our speech, our expression, our language reflects on the outside what's going on inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just fascinated by that in general. So that will certainly be explored also in my next novel.
Wow, I'm so excited. Get your butt in that chair and start writing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm looking at you and I can see your beautiful cover in the back. It Could Be Worse. Tell us about the title. What does this title mean to you and how did you come up with it?
It came first, Carrie. Like when I was a journalist, I used to write art reviews, feature stories, everything my brain works like backward. So I told this story recently and it's interesting. I don't know how in Miami, where I went to high school, my English teachers, we would have like write a research paper. And there was this whole kind of like rigid, do note cards and do an outline. Well, if any of you are listening, secret's out. I wrote the paper first and then I handed all the stuff in backward because I got the all. Like my brain just saw it all at once. I'm like, I don't want to sit here and waste time with these like outlines and blah, blah, blah. I just wrote.
Wow.
So I probably would get in trouble. I know that's so crazy of me. What a rebel. Said no one ever. But
the fact that you could even do that, I think that's amazing.
I find it like almost, I visualize like a river and I feel that blocks my creative process, like little beavers in a dam and putting big boulders. I just want the whole thing out. Yeah. And then if these little assignments, the 10 points, then the 20, I don't know how they do it now. Oh my gosh. I found it very suffocating and sort of like creatively stilting.
Yeah.
So same thing with the novel. I knew the title. I just knew it. It was weird immediately. And It Could Be Worse to me. I mean, I grew up hearing that. I'm sure a lot of people.
Yeah.
Guessing you might have.
Yes.
And it is a positive phrase. And, your listeners can't see my little quote, my little air quote things going on. but it also could be extremely invalidating.
Yeah.
And I've had so many interesting conversations in bookstores. I'm speaking at my synagogue this weekend. I spoke in New York, LA, Michigan, and it's come up. And people have said things like, wow, that title really struck a chord. And other people say, but it's a positive thing. I said, like any language, like any phrase,
Yeah.
like any art form, it's really how it's interpreted by the listener, by the reader, by the viewer. So to me, Allegra thought it could be worse. I mean, it could.
Yeah.
She has a thriving therapy practice, amazing kids, wonderful marriage, lifelong best friend she met in camp who is just a hoot. I mean, she's like her foil. She's a wild wahine. So what if her parents, were demeaning and fat shamed her and all? I mean, whatever,
Yeah.
like could be worse. And
Yeah.
she also heard that growing up. And
Yeah.
so it's that programming again, right?
Yeah.
Where who am I to complain? Look at all the good in my life.
Yeah.
The way to look at that is, dysfunctional loyalty. That's a term I learned through my research. I'd never known that term. And I'm really noticing it in my life now with people where, you just keep excusing and excusing.
Yeah.
I watch people, I love doing it to other people.
Yeah.
And you want to say that, oh, you're such an accepting person. And I think that's important, but not when it's hurting you,
Yeah.
not when it's toxic.
Yeah.
And so I think Allegra was sort of in that position, especially with her father, both parents. But it was just, well, but he means well. He's a doctor. He saves lives, for God's sakes. Right. So that's where it could be worse came from. It's kind of a multifaceted title. And the cover also has a lot of meaning, a lot of intentionality. The ladybug, she definitely makes many appearances.
Yes. And the purple is something with the purple.
Clearly, I mean, I'm a little upset. I mean,
I love it because even your social media, sometimes your emojis are all the purple. And every time I see purple, I think of you.
Literally since birth, my car is purple. Like when I'm telling you, I take it seriously. It's not like a branding thing. It's a Dara thing. And Allegra loves purple too, apparently.
I love it. Well, speaking of your book tour, you have been in it to win it. I've been love watching all of the stuff that you've been doing and sharing on social media. Was there any memorable moments with readers at any of your tours that really stuck with you?
Oh, that is such a wonderful question, and nobody's asked it. I love that.
I think connecting with people is just so important, and I think we all take it for granted at times. So having the story in your book, I'm sure you've had some memorable moments.
I tell you, I love connecting with people. My husband always says, would you stop collecting friends? Like it's been going on since I'm a little girl. When my kids are little, my son would have constant ear infections. And on Passover, there's this quite ornery, crotchety man who was the pharmacist and nobody liked him and he smoked and he hacked. And I somehow broke through to this man. And so every Passover, I'd start bringing him, like I made him chocolate matzah. And people would say, how did you get him to smile? Meaning, I think that when you see people and you hear people. And so on my book tour, I really tried hard. And sometimes it held up lines with signings and whatnot to talk to every single person because I know how much that means to me. And I know how it feels when someone doesn't.
Yeah.
I said, tell me about you. Where are you from? What's your background? I had one woman come up to me. This was beautiful at Books and Books, which was like childhood dream. And my friend Brad Meltzer had offered to introduce me. So that night was magic. He finally had tears. He was talking about me. And I hate being talked about. I'm not shy, clearly, but I'd much rather be interviewing. Like if you interviewed me a year ago, I would itching. I much prefer to be the one listening. Yes. I don't like being, a stage center. I really, it's interesting. I keep wondering if I'm somehow like a introvert that never knew she was. It's been a really fascinating journey. But back to your question. So when Brad introduced me, I just started to cry finally, like all these tears. He was so kind and beautiful. We've known each other for years. And there was a woman that night that came up at Books and Books. And of course, and I was so grateful. It was packed. I mean, I thought, oh God, 2 people are going to show up. And to me, it was such an honor to go to Books and Books. That's like one of my favorite bookstores in the country. I'm a Miami girl, and it was packed. And so I walked in, I was like, oh God, what am I going to do with this? And this woman approaches me and she looks kind of teary and she's in a polka dot dress and I don't know her, not even vaguely familiar. And she took my hand and she said, I was supposed to be here tonight. And I said, tell me your name. And she said, I've never even heard of you. I had plans tonight and I was walking on the street and saw this. So I said, I'm supposed to go. She said, you are so captivating, not just your story, but it's like you're speaking to my soul. And she said, I just got divorced and I had a mother very much like Dr. Kurt in the book. And I just need to know you. And I've had moments like that. And I was so humbled and touched. I didn't know what to do. I just hugged her. Wow. And I just said, thank you for taking the time to share that. This is why I write. This is, you don't even know, even with my podcast, for instance, I know you could probably track things. I'm on my 5th year. I don't even know who I'm reaching until I hear from someone. And I just keep trying to, it's like throwing the pebble. I'm looking at my lake right now. Mm-hmm. Water has a lot of meaning in the book too. And it's like when you throw that stone in the water, I used to do all the time in camp, speaking of camp, and seeing that ripple and the circles. And so I've had moments like that. Like I was at Northshire Books, tiniest crowd. And actually, I'm glad you're asking this because I'm going back to solo podcast episodes. I released the first one a few weeks ago. And what I'm talking about this week, thank you. What I'm talking about this week is what I've learned on my book tour the last 6 months and how much it's grown me as a human. So it's some of what you're asking. And another thing I'll talk about is it doesn't matter how many people show up. Yeah. You can get caught in the ego space. I had one event with 3 people and it was a pretty major bookstore that I had to work really hard to get into.
Yeah.
And I was almost embarrassed. I walked in and went, oh my God. My husband was with me. He's like, do you wait? I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? In that audience, this man who just clearly was just, you could tell, I could sense, I should say, was someone who probably didn't open up easily. He was really sharing. And this other woman came up to me and she said, I live in Michigan. I went to Interlochen. I said, oh my gosh. And it was like this. And she said, I'm only in New Hampshire because my son's at a music camp nearby. And my husband sat down. He said, this is going to be a while. I said, yep, get comfortable, honey.
Honestly, it probably worked out for the best because of the quality time that you got with those individuals. It was meant to be. Exactly.
And then Zibby, who I adore, has become a friend and just such a wonderful champion of authors. I was at her bookshop. And again, smaller crowd, so meaningful.
Yeah.
And I just had such interesting, and I'm not done. I got asked to speak at the Miami Book Fair. I'm so excited.
Amazing.
Like, I am over the moon. And
congratulations.
I'm so grateful. Thank you. And I'm actually speaking now, apparently, on 2 different panels, not just one. So some big things are happening in the next few months. And I don't take any of it for granted, Carrie. I'm so, so grateful. I just want to reach people. That's the bottom line. I don't need titles and awards. And would that be nice? Of course. I would be lying if I said it weren't. But I'm not in it for that personally. If that happens, then it's supposed to. If not, I just wanted, like, these one-on-one conversations to me are so meaningful.
Yeah.
And just to reach people and hopefully touch them in a place that, in their heart center, more than just their head.
That's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing. I mean, yeah, if you can just touch like one person, it really is a ripple effect. And you're doing that through your writing. So bravo, that has to mean so much to you. And you better keep writing. You mentioned Zibby. You mentioned Zibby. I'm dying to go to her bookstore, by the way. One day I'll make it out there.
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. It feels like a home.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
I would love to. I actually met her at the Mom 2.0 conference this past year. She's lovely, such a character in terms of just her personality. And I loved her book. You bring her up, which sparks my next question, because you collaborated on an upcoming project with her and a bunch of other authors. Your Jewish identity seems to influence your writing and your storytelling. You had some themes in It Could Be Worse. Could you tell us about that a little bit?
Oh, I love that question. Another one I haven't been asked. That's it's so refreshing. Thank you, Carrie. Cut that. Excuse me. Didn't do my vocal warm-ups.
No, it's okay.
I'm just kidding. So yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I have some really dear friends in the author community, like Jean Meltzer, who blurbed my book. She's one of the first she offered. She's such a generous soul. Sarah Goodman Confino, Heidi Shertuck, all these amazing, amazing authors, very Jewish themed. And so when I wrote my book, it wasn't really intentional. Like, I wasn't thinking, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a really Jewish novel. And I realized as I wrote how important our grandparents are. They were in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And my grandparents were from Poland. Unfortunately, a very typical, there were nine of my grandmother's side, for instance. There were nine. At the time they got here, there were only five. We
Mm-hmm.
can only assume the rest persecuted in the Holocaust. It's always been something that I found so, I'm going to use the word triggering. I feel like it's being overused, but so important to me because my grandparents gave me Judaism.
Yeah.
My parents, we didn't do much. After I was 13, we didn't belong to a synagogue anymore. And when I left for college, I was almost like an atheist. I was so,
Wow.
I felt like it was jappy and materialistic. A lot of the Jewish people I was around, although most of my friends were Jewish, but I had friends from all walks of life, and I still do.
Yeah.
And so I went off to Indiana University, and I pretty much intentionally dated everyone not Jewish. I had a serious boyfriend at the time from high school. And then this is actually a funny segue, but actually related to what you asked. I didn't rush the sorority thing. I'm like, that is not for me. And he was a film major and we were seeing each other every month. And then we broke up that summer. And so my sophomore year, I said, let me just try it. I mean, I'll meet people.
Yeah.
So I did the sorority I wanted, the sorority of my dreams. And after 5 days, I de-pledged. I'm like, this is not for me. So I was a sorority dropout, stayed friends with the girls.
Yeah.
Ironically, by senior year or so, they said, you're so smart to do that. I said, I don't know about smart, but I was so involved in the newspaper. I
Yeah.
started a 20-page Arts Weekly. I had a double major. Like I lived at the newspaper.
That's
That was
amazing.
it just ended. It was called Lux, which means light in Latin. And so I share that because at IU, by my junior year, I ended up going to Hillel. I met who is still one of my best friends, who she's one of the reasons I'm going to give her a shout out, Robin, who kept saying, you have to go back to writing. And she's one of the reasons this book finally happened. But we met, and by senior year, I was living with almost all girls that were Jewish. Again, it just happened. None of them were in sorority. We just found each other. A lot more Jewish kids at IU now. But when I went, the statistic, maybe 5%, I don't know. I don't want to misspeak. But I then, it really became important to me. And then I married my husband. I felt madly in love very quickly. We're together 26 years. I mean, the love of my life. I am so blessed. I don't take a second for granted. Mm-hmm. His heart is very much like Benito. He doesn't look like him. He's not Jewish Cuban. He's not Cuban. And he's definitely sculpted. But his heart is very, very much inspired. And so, I went through all these phases within my faith because then his mom died suddenly right before our wedding.
Oh, wow.
And I went back to not believing in anything. And I said, even in the mourner's Kaddish, you're praising God. I thought, what? And so a lot of soul searching. But right before my wedding, my cousin, who's an Orthodox rabbi, who I didn't even know if he'd marry us, a lineage of Landaus, very, very well-known lineage. I didn't know that then. He also had gotten his PhD in psychology, this German Jewish man. And I had all these questions. I said, how can we have the wedding? How can we do this? And he said, Dara, it's very Jewish to question. And Carrie, it's like my whole entire psyche opened up. And I said, really? He said, no one's told you that? I said, that's all I do is question. I question everything. I thought, oh my God, I guess I could be a rabbi. So that really pivoted everything. And then I really leaned more into it. We had our kids. We light the Shabbat candles whenever we can. I'm not Shomer Shabbos. I love bacon. I'm not going to lie. But that's all new because I was anemic for a while and I had to eat red meat. And so going into it, I really wanted to also explore that multi-generational love. So Lego's grandparents are so important to her. Yeah. And so mine were to me as well. And I didn't have them that long because my grandmother ended up having Alzheimer's. So she was here, but she really wasn't present. And that became like my next book for sure will have some Jewish themes, but is it centered like a Holocaust novel? No. And it's more for me, the spirit of the Jewish people, the resilience, I guess the questioning, the strength, and especially now what's going on in our world is just horrific. I don't care if you're Jewish or not. For me, it's about humanity. Yeah. So the project that I'm collaborating on, I'm one of the founding members of the Artists Against Anti-Semitism. It was 30 of us. Allison Hammer had this idea. She's awesome. And after October 7th, a bunch of authors, we just started chatting and we were just so obviously completely gutted by what's happening. Yeah. Started this group. I'm really proud to share it is now a 501c3. Wow. And we raised I don't even want to, at least $120,000, $130,000 in a 2-week auction online. Really proud of it.
Congratulations. Wow.
So proud of this group, these passionate women. And so our next project, and all of this is going to combat hate and anti-Semitism. We were talking at the end of June, and Zibby suggested, she's amazing. She's just such a firecracker and such an amazing human. She said, what if we wrote essays on what it's like to be Jewish now? So 75 of us, a few rabbis, advocates, authors, 75 of us wrote very, very intimate essays. And October 1st, it's coming out, the audio and ebook. I narrated my own essay. November 1st is the paperback. I'm actually going to Manhattan to speak about it on October 1st with 40 other authors.
Wow.
I was just asked to speak at the Miami Book Fair on it. I'm speaking about this incredible anthology in February with another author who's in it. I mean, it's just, and I'm so grateful because like so many others, I felt so helpless. And I have 30 or 40 family members in Israel. And what I wrote about, my cousin was killed in the war. The fourth weekend.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But my essay is called We Show Up. And so it's also about this random man that I don't even know, somebody my husband knows from a business organization. We had just called to check in on him. Mm-hmm. And he said, tell me about Dara's cousin. Where do they live? He said, I'm paying a Shiva call. I've never met him in my life. This is not like a good thing. And I looked at my husband. I was so moved by even just the thought. And I thought, come on. He has 3 days. They're going to be called to serve any minute. I mean, this man's life is... He calls me a week later. He WhatsApp us. Images of my cousin's artwork. My first cousin, my uncle, who I haven't seen in like 5 years. I was hysterical crying. I didn't even know what to say to him. So I called him and we spoke for an hour and a half. I said, I can't even find the words to thank you. He went in uniform.
Yeah.
He sat with them. And so my essay in particular, I hope is not sad. It's also really, I hope, inspiring, because that's what we do as Jews. We show up for each other. So as creators, we have to show up for our work, right? As mothers, we show up for our children. As wives, partners, we show up for, our loved ones. And as Jews, I hope we really show up for each other. And
I love that. I mean, honestly, the Jewish community, they are resilient in that way. And they don't just show up like half-assed. They truly show up. I mean, I converted to Judaism about 15 years ago. It was, and this isn't to get all religious or anything like that, but just from my upbringing and feeling lost. And I ended up studying it. My husband and I were about to get married. He's Jewish. I was Catholic, and he knew everything about like Catholicism and Christianity. And I was like, well, I should probably learn some things about Judaism. And after the third class, I was like, I would cry every night because it spoke to me. I'll never forget the rabbi saying, good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And life doesn't always have to make sense. And there were so many things, including the Holiday of Atonement, that allowed me to forgive my mother, that Judaism and its foundation and the community of people really supported me and changed my life. So I have so much love. I raised my kids Jewish. We have a Jewish home. So when things like October 7th are happening and you don't know how to react, you don't know how to respond, you don't know how to understand it all. When I read novels with Jewish themes, when I saw that you guys were launching these collections of essays, I'm just like, wow, this is, again, Jewish women, Jewish community standing up, sticking together, and just like spreading love. I don't know. It makes me almost want to cry. I don't know. Congratulations on everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And
I love it.
And it's so needed. Beautiful. I'm reconnecting with my own Judaism, both when I was getting married, and again, I didn't have this much growing up. It's no knock on my parents, but after my brother and I were bar mitzvahed and bat mitzvahed, we didn't even belong to a synagogue. Yeah. So I felt like when my grandparents died young-ish, a lot of that went. But I was always this very deeply spiritual being. Like I almost call myself a Judas. Like I love Buddhism, Hinduism. I really, to me, being a good, in my opinion, Jewish person is being a good person. Yeah. Full stop. I don't care if you never step into a synagogue, or I have friends that are Orthodox. To me, it's about how do you exist in the world? How do you treat people? And I really mean that. And then I became a mother, and it became more and more important again. Like when I was a little girl, my parents would always say, she's just our spiritual one. And they'd kind of, I wouldn't say they'd mock me, but maybe they didn't understand. I always wanted to go to the crystal store and the waterways in Aventura. Like it's not there anymore. It's called the unicorn. I'm understanding now why. And a lot of the Kabbalah, there's so many ties to Judaism that I started to really dig into early in my marriage. Like when I said my husband's mother died suddenly, and I just, it was always important to me, but it became important on different levels. And, as you become a mother and you become, you're about to publish a book. We should talk about that. I'm so excited, and you need to come on my podcast. It really, it grows you as a human. And I love my religion, but I also love it because for me, it's a culture, it's a community.
Yeah.
My best friend of 30 years is Catholic. Another friend of mine is Christian. Another one's Greek Orthodox. So I have people in my life of all faiths, and that's important to me also. I don't want to live an insular life. To me, that's how you grow. Yeah. And again, it's safer, it's easier, but I love having conversations and learning from other people.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's all about just showing up in the world and just, how can I impact, the world today? And I think it's just like, no matter what religion you are, it's just that understanding and the value of connection and community. And I think if we really made that a priority in our lives more, I think there would be so much more love and respect for others. Yes. So, yeah.
And I think so much of the hate comes from the not knowing.
Not knowing. Yeah.
And I was, that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe it's not coffee. Maybe it's wine, Carrie.
Yeah, maybe it's wine. Also, please do not get your news and facts from social media, people.
Oh my gosh, please. Oh my goodness. That cannot be stated enough.
I mean, I
TikTok,
can't.
You want to keep going?
Honestly, I just can't.
Oh goodness.
I honestly, I just want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for writing this novel. It could be worse. Everyone, please pick up your copy if you haven't already on Amazon. It is an amazing read. I have 2 kids and no help, and I finished it in a weekend. I hid in the bathroom. I even probably faked a headache so my husband and kids would leave me alone. I did everything, but I finished it in a weekend. I could not put it down. And it's honestly the perfect book for book clubs because so many conversations can come from it. I just want to thank you. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Surviving Roots. Let's continue this conversation as a community. For more updates about the show, remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. Also, there will be some special bonus footage from the show on Instagram at carrie.fund. I'll see you there.